friends. I want to share something with you that made me choose this for the beginning of today. A year ago, I had a friend invite me to the woods. And he said, yeah, you know, this company, and you don't hear me? Oh, better now? Okay. There's this company called Getaway, and they rent cabins in the woods to urban people like ourselves who are trying to escape from work. You won't have any Wi-Fi, you won't have your phone. It's just going to be and us. And I followed, and it changed the way I looked at getting out of the city a lot. Because Getaway provides these cabins close by urban spaces, get an address, so it's kind of like a mystery until you get very close to it. And you're there, and you're just in nature just for a short amount of time, and you completely get away from all your devices and everything. It made me think about like disconnecting and purposeful being. Then, John, who I contacted, who runs Getaway, published an article saying that he is actually trying to make his own company work more meaningful. And that was the starting point for this panel. I asked him, can you please talk about this? How you put the Getaway kind of mood into your own company. And she said, sure. And I also know somebody else who's doing that at their company. Let's run a platform, a magazine, and she's amazing. And you'll see she's doing it right, too. But the first email that I got from Jess said, hey, I'm not going to read your email the next couple of hours. I'm sorry. And it was probably the strictest email I've ever received from someone saying, hey, I'm not going to read this, okay, until, you know, in about 6 hours or so. So she changed the way I look at emails. I think Priya had the most beautiful comparison for email. It's a to-do list from the rest of the world that you get without asking for permission, right? Without them asking you for permission. And because I had so much to do in this conference and I could not, you know, really concentrate on something I also have to do, is writing. I'm writing a book. I was introduced to the third panelist today, Jeremy Redleaf. Jeremy has created a unique experience within New York called Caveday. Go in there, they take your phone, and you work together with other people harder than you have ever worked and happier than you have ever worked. I haven't done like that until I went there. And I'm so happy that all people agree to share with you how they look at work, what advice they can give you on working better, and how they have struggled in getting there. Please welcome Davis, John Staff, and Jeremy Redleaf. I just read something that you wrote in an email to me yesterday, and I was like, oh my God. You dreamed of your co-founder.
I did.
I have not dreamed of my co-founder yet, but I'm sure it's going to happen very soon. Please tell us about that dream.
2 nights ago, I had a dream about my co-founder, Pete, and it was quite a sad dream. Pete died in the dream, and I don't normally have sad dreams, but I just was like deeply sad while I was sleeping because my good friend and co-founder had passed away, and I was talking to his sister, and we were comforting each other and thinking I was meant to know this guy for 60 more years, and now he's gone, and I called his mother, and it was so emotional, and then Pete showed back up because he'd faked his own death because he had too many tasks, which is twisted, but fits with Pete and fits with many of us, I think. Pete's a guy who, has a huge heart. He's super smart, creative, and doesn't know how to say no. So as a result, he starts companies with people like me. He does nonprofits with other friends. He's making a film and gets completely overcommitted in a world that allows work to slip into every moment of every day, every week of the year, and gets completely overwhelmed about it. And I share that, one, because what an odd dream to have, but two, because I wonder how many of us feel that way, that we have all these tools that are meant to make us more efficient and more productive, and I guess that was meant to give us more free time, but maybe the opposite has happened.
Who has ever thought about faking their own death work-wise? Oh, I see 2 hands. All right. All right. What did you take away from that? Like, in terms of in your own work environment, the struggle that you had creating your own company. Your company has been one of the most wonderful startups. You declined an offer on Shark Tank, which made you even more popular with a lot of people. What was your own struggle, and how did it lead to that dream, and what did you take from it in terms of working?
Yeah, thanks for being a customer, by the way. Thanks for being a guest. I'll try to be brief, but I think about, as you mentioned in the introduction, our company and our brand is about, you should really take time off. It's really important. It's not just nice to do. It makes you, if you take real time off, you're more creative, you're more productive, you're better to be around. You actually get better performance reviews if you take more vacation days. The majority of managers want people to take time off, but many of us don't do it, right? And we have the term work martyrdom has come into the culture, which means, feeling like you have to work more than everybody else to get ahead, feeling like you have to work on vacation. And so that dream is sort of not just a dream, it's philosophically for me, the thought about how do we define how much work is enough work? And if you think back, broadly, the 80s and 90s, I guess you could call the 9-to-5 era, which was bad because it was rigid, right? You had to be at work at 9, you had to leave at 5. But really good because it had distinct boundaries. And then we followed that up with what I would call the Wall Street era, which was all about work, work, work all the time. Don't take any time off of work, which was obviously bad. And then Silicon Valley came along most recently and said, well, it's not about how many hours you work, it's about your output, right? But the problem is, at least as far as I can tell, nobody figured out how to tell us how much output is enough output. And I speak both as an employee and as a manager, right? So how do I know that you've worked enough this week in a world where I think all of us, I don't want to speak for you, but we're ambitious in our company and we want to do a whole bunch of stuff, and we want to do stuff in our non-profit sort of efforts, and there's always more to do. And so how do we stop and say, that's enough for today, and even though I'm going to disappoint that person or not make enough progress on this project or this cause, it's time to stop.
You have introduced something at your company called the Pomodoro method. What is that?
So I'm always trying to invent goofy ways to solve this problem, but one thing that's worked for me, and I think it's different for everybody, is this thing called the Pomodoro method. Has anybody heard of this?
Yep.
So great. Perfect audience for this conference. So for those who don't know, it's the idea of working in distinct chunks of time and forcing yourself to take a break at the end. So typically, the way I use it is either 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break, or 50 minutes of work followed by a 10-minute break. And the key is you have to work on one thing and only one thing during that work block, and you have to stop at the end of when the timer goes off. I set a timer. You have to stop even if you're in the middle of a thought. And science tells us that that's important, because if we just keep plowing forward, even if we're feeling productive, and don't give our brain a rest, that's a huge ingredient to exhaustion.
How conservative is your view, you say, to make this very, very tough distinction between working and not working?
I wouldn't have used the word conservative, but I care a lot about boundaries. And so we're doing, we do mandatory vacation. So I think unlimited vacation is an oxymoron. What does that mean? But we also want to solve the problem of people not taking their vacation days. 577 million vacation days in America were not used last year because people either don't feel comfortable or feel like they need to work to get ahead. So we give everybody that's full-time 20 days off, and we make sure you take them. And we're at the end of the year now, so that chicken is coming home to roost as I'm forcing people to not work in December, which is awkward to explain to my investors. So we do forced vacation. We do one long weekend every week. So tomorrow the company is shut down for what we call Getaway, which is one Friday off a month that we hope to expand over time. We are militant about every meeting having preparation. So if you're calling a meeting, you have to write up background materials and an agenda, and every meeting starts and ends on time. And there's more stuff like this, but I guess that's conservative or rigid. It takes a lot of explaining to point out, like, I'm not just doing this because I have too much free time, although that's a little bit the problem. We're doing it because otherwise, what I call coordination, meetings, Slacks, emails, talking to colleagues, takes up the full workday, and therefore your what I call deep work or production time ends up happening on nights and weekends, and that's not a good long-term recipe.
Yes, you have an entire paragraph in I think every email that you sent, right? Exactly about this. Can you explain this paragraph to us? What brought you to put it in there?
Yeah, so if you were to email me when I respond, it has the times in which I am actually looking at my email. So I don't operate my workday out of my inbox. I actually don't even look at my inbox until I've done what I deem the most important thing first in the morning. That might be sitting with my son and having breakfast, which it typically is, and then something as simple as calling my accountant back who has been chasing me for a few weeks, or writing a proposal for a brand partnership that I've been working on. At that point, usually around 10 or 11, I open my inbox for the first time. That way, I'm being proactive in my business and my creativity and how I want to spend my time versus reactive to every ping, ding, and notification that is really just somebody else's to-do list coming into my inbox. And then I'm really trying to help people in our modern world. There's instant and there's urgent, and they're now blending, and nobody's really noticing the difference anymore. So just because something is instant doesn't mean that it's urgent. So everything feels like it's on fire all the time, and that's not sustainable. It's also not good for us biologically. And so when I email you, it says, I check my email at these times throughout the day. I'm busy working away from the inbox. If you can't wait 24 to 48 hours, you can call my cell phone, and I also have a landline if it's urgent. Guess how many people have called in 4.5 years with an urgent matter that couldn't wait? 0. Because you're making them qualified. Instant is entirely different than urgent. But I had to do this. I started my company, Folk Rebellion, which is essentially a media brand on a mission, trying to get people to wake up that we need to live well with our digital and our tech, and there's a better way to do it. And I do that through slow media, analog offerings, in-person events like this. But I started this because I was a digital brand strategist, and I know you've probably seen these stories out there in the news of people that worked in tech and then went very far the other direction. I got sick about 5 years ago and didn't know what was wrong with my brain. I had severe memory loss, a general sense of malaise and unwellness from the second I woke up till I went to bed. I knew how I had spent my day. I used to joke that I couldn't tell you what I had for breakfast because my brains were scrambled eggs. My memory was gone. And thankfully, living here in the city, you have access to a lot of wonderful doctors. And I went to everyone, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. So I went on vacation, and I brought my laptop and my iPad and my Kindle and my computer and everything. And the plane, I went to Hawaii to visit my sister, didn't have Wi-Fi on it. And this was absolutely terrifying to me because I had 15 clients. I was a consultant at the time, and they knew that I was on vacation. I had put someone in charge while I was gone, poor girl who I didn't actually let do her job. And when I landed, I took my phone out and I started texting everyone saying, so sorry, I was off the grid. I'm back. I'm here, whatever you need. And my husband at the time looked at me. I was getting the lay in the airport, and he's like, you suck, and I'm not doing this with you for the next 2 weeks. People wait their whole life to come to Hawaii on this vacation. Give me all your devices. And I just looked at him, and I laughed in his face, and he's like, no, I'm not kidding. And argument ensued, mom guilt, wife guilt, all these different things, and I started crying in the Honolulu airport, stepped aside, called all my clients, put an out of office on, and said, if you need me, you can contact my husband's cell phone, and here's his number. The end result of all of this was 8 days later, which was so significant to me, and I talk about this all the time because the average vacation you guys take is like max how long? A week, right? Max. This was 8 days. I woke up on the island of Kona, and it was like someone had turned a switch on my brain back on. I was clear, I was present, I could tell you what the the ocean smelled like, the salt in my nose, and what the sheets felt like under my skin. And I was a writer before anything. I kind of fell face first into a digital career on accident. And so I got my journal out and I started writing what's different. And you said you already know the answer. The only thing different than being in Hawaii on vacation is your lack of technology. So I came back to New York.
And Hawaii's amazing.
It was awesome. There was a rooster crowing outside. I came back to New York, and because of all my different clients in the kid space and the tech space, I reached out to these people much smarter than I and said, I think I scrambled my brain. What can I do about it? And at the time, there really wasn't a term. Today, they call it digital dementia. And they said that the best thing that you can do is start to make changes in your own life, because the tech companies aren't going to make changes fast enough for you. The government's not going to do policy, so self-regulation has to come from your own home. And I started to learn that I was being counterproductive. I was making mistakes. My creativity was waning. All of these things that people were paying me lots of money for to do on behalf of them or their clients or their brands, I wasn't giving 100%. And once you start to realize the facts and then you practice it, like you would at Caveday, you start to see you can move mountains in 4 hours. My output, by the way, is 6. And I know that. And I've tried to do like...
Your max hours?
If I'm to focus and do it like, single task and focus and take breaks, by the time I get to right past that 6 hours, I can feel my brain start to go to mush a little bit and the work quality goes down. Now, that's coming from a place of privilege. I have my own business and I can say that. But I also have figured out ways in which I can make it work for my team too. So anyway, that's how I started.
Thank you, Jess. I think this fits perfectly into your story. You actually are in the movie industry. You produce, you shoot, you act. But you also waited in a breather conference room with a lamp, with a cave lamp, and took my phone away for an entire day. So I feel you. What made you do that? Like, what was the point for you, point of turnaround, point to say, I want to become a babysitter for procrastinators?
A nanny for procrastinators. I'm an artist, and like both of you and probably all of you, I've realized that we are living in the age of distraction, and I was getting less done, and my art, my writing, my directing takes my full focus, and for me to hit flow, I have to be working for more than a Pomodoro. I have to be working for an hour before I'm really in it, and I never had an hour in my day. Like, I looked at my calendar and there was just no time, and so I was having a crisis, and my therapist said, what needs to happen? And I said, I need to take a cave day. And then investors appeared instantly, and we did that. I started taking cave days by myself, and it was super productive. I realized that I could do more in a day than I thought possible if I went off the grid, and it was so lonely, and it took so much energy to manage those boundaries myself. And so I thought, what if there was a way that we could manage each other's boundaries and use all that energy to pummel into our work? And so that's what we started doing. And are you doing work right now?
Checking questions.
See, that's what we do. We got to check. And so we started doing that in New York on a Sunday. When people come in, we take their phones. We teach them about the science of deep work, and then we support each other all day long in doing our best, most important tasks. And people get done more than they think possible. And now we do it 5 times a week.
And I saw people being so thankful when they leave. People work so hard and they leave so thankful. What do you think is the secret sauce of this kind of like environment that you create just so people work without their phones? Like, what's the secret?
I don't know, but I think it is that just by choosing to come to Caveday, by paying money, by making the time, you've made an incredible gift to yourself. And so by the moment you walk in the door, you're already set up for success. And then we create a space where something else can happen, an altered space. And we help each other, we see each other for the hard work we're doing instead of the result. Most of us only get recognized for the work we're doing when we finish and when we have the final product. And at Caveday, we every hour we're checking in with you, like, how's it going? What dragon are you slaying in your head right now? And that's really powerful.
We have a question here from Laura, who basically asks, how do you implement, nurture, mandate new work practices and behaviors in your teams? And that is both at the office and, I think this is a crucial point, remote. How do you make all this work in a world that is more and more distributed?
I can
Please.
start. So you have to practice what you preach. It's really, really hard. We were just talking off on the side about how I started, or we've all started businesses that are to make you more productive and free up space for balance and better work-life balance, if that even exists, and that's another whole conversation. But at the same time, I become exhausted from doing this mission, right? So I'm kind of back to where I started from, right, with corporate America. So I try very, very hard to practice what I preach. So for Folk Rebellion, if I believe that emails should have office hours like the old 9 to 5, which I really do, I had a career where you faxed something and you left the fax machine at home or at the office. It didn't come home with you. So when you went home, you got to go out on a date, you got to see your family and friends, you got to relax and go back into that place in your mind where you're processing things from the day that you don't even realize that you're doing. So I know how good that is, and so I want my team to be able to do that. Many of them are all over the country. Some are in different areas of the world, and so I ask them, what are the work hours that works best for them? You know, the way I work, I'm typically better in the middle of the day, early evening. Some people are really productive late at night, and some people are really productive early in the morning. So I don't want to dictate when they can work, but on behalf of my brand, I don't want them feeling that they have to be working 24/7 or checking emails 24/7. So they let me know those hours, and then we agree on the hours in which we all should be emailing together, and we use tools to schedule those. So if I'm working on an email about something that I have to get back to at 1 o'clock in the morning, I do not send it, and I don't let my team send it to anyone, because that's creating an anxiety in somebody else's world. Whether you want to, like, that's not the intention or not, but just the ping on the email is something that when they open their inbox in the morning, yes, I know maybe they shouldn't do that, but maybe they don't have that luxury. So we schedule everything, and we make sure that that happens. We don't work on social media girl has to work on weekends. We make sure that she's off Monday and Tuesday. If there is a customer service thing that needs to be answered, we have 2 different customer services teams, ones that take the evenings and ones that take the morning, as opposed to a social media or a customer service person who feels like they just always have to be checking. So it's not perfect by any means, but it really starts with the permission of letting them know that they aren't expected to be on 24/7, because they know that that is not what's best for them and not what's best for my company.
Scheduling is the secret. Do you want to share things that you...
Yeah, well, we work with a lot of companies and help them look at how they can do this. And what we find is that 99.9% of the companies have never had the conversation. And I think that's because no one wants to be the bad cop. Or be not uncool. Like, hey, let's talk about like how we work well together. So we help teams create a work manifesto. When are we best? What are the tools of communication? How long can a message wait on Slack before I'm going to get mad at you or bring it up? And what are our deep work hours? When are our off times? And what do we want? What kind of work do we consciously want to do together? How do we want to live while we're on this team? And how can we honor that on a day-to-day basis?
And it probably doesn't always work. You probably have to shift it. Like what you think might work, they have to go back and right? Like,
Totally
I'm only going to email 5 times or check 5 times. It might end up being 15, but
Way up top, yes, it starts at the top and with values, but we also talk about it a lot, and to the point where, to be candid, it gets sort of frustrating because once you set the value, it's like, okay, how do we stay true to the value? And then you have to implement a lot, at least in my experience, a lot of specific practices, and those change over time if you're in a changing, growing organization. So what worked when we were 8 people doesn't work now that we're 37 people.
Yep.
Another thing, this is just my weird analytical brain maybe, but I'm really into rules and structures. And so like the Friday off tomorrow, the point I would make is it's about keeping me honest as much as anybody else. Like, I don't like that nobody's going to work tomorrow now that tomorrow's come. 3 months ago, I thought it was great, right? But the reality is we have a rule, and now we have to follow it.
Do you have any advice from going from unlimited to mandatory vacation? How does that work?
We never did unlimited. It's funny that people bring it up because it sounds so nice, and maybe I'm going to make some enemies here, but I get the philosophy behind unlimited, which is if you need time, take it. And so we try to do that with sick days and mental health days, and I don't want anyone coming to work if they're not feeling up to working. But the mandatory vacation is to combat this problem of people not feeling like they can take vacation, and it's still a real problem. in our company, even with mandatory vacation, because there's never enough time in the day, there's never enough people, and so people feel like, yeah, that's really nice, John, but I am working on this really important project, and we all know that it needs to get done, so I'm going to not do it. And so the advice, I guess, is you have to stick to your guns, and the thing I've had to work harder at is making sure I get the rest of the leadership team on board, because if they don't believe in it, they're not going to enforce it. So
When they go on vacation, do you have any policies about emails and if they're working remotely? Because that's another whole thing.
yeah, we've been pretty successful with that part, both of vacations and nights and weekends, of getting people trained not to, be making phone calls and answering emails. It was hard in the beginning. I thought, well, I'll say, I don't like to think about myself this way, but I'm the boss, and I'm going to say, please don't email or call me, or each other. And in reality, it took a lot of repeating that to get it to, it's like, why are you calling me at 9 p.m. on a Saturday to talk about nothing?
Right.
But I repeated that enough, and that sort of took hold. And now we've institutionalized it with, maybe some of you know D&D email, do not disturb email. You can your email from coming in at certain hours, so I don't get emails after I go home at the end of the day or on weekends, and same with vacation.
Yeah, that's great. I asked because I think it's 50%. There's a study that was done of people who take vacation and bring their cell phone with them to the beach chair or to the top of a mountain, or when you're home for a family reunion. It's actually doubling your stress than had you just stayed in the office, because you're feeling shitty that you're not 100% present on the vacation that you've saved and waited for, or with your family for the first time, or your sick mom or something, and you're feeling shitty that you're letting down your coworkers, your team, your boss. And so it's just better to just not take it. And there's some crazy numbers about the younger and younger that people get, the less they've ever had that experience of being totally off on a vacation and away from work, and work is blending into day-to-day life, and coworkers blend into friends, and offices turn into bars with guests. There's just this big blurry line now, and I kind of feel bad that maybe some people don't know that there's this huge benefit to having a life away from work for periods of time.
This question, by the way, about the limited vacation was from Sharon. Thank you for that. We have a question here that got upvoted. I'm just going to put it out there because we already touched on it by Dan. We're all here because we drink the Kool-Aid. What protests of resistance do you most hear? I think that
What do you think it means?
I don't know. Thank you, Dan. But I think it means that if you imply all these tools, if you onboard something and tell them, hey, we have to schedule, we have to communicate all the time, making remote work actually heavy planning. Like, what is the thickest resistance or working with corporations that you have encountered, and how did you get over that?
I would just start by saying, point taken on drinking the Kool-Aid. The hard part here is making it work, so I don't have the answer, besides to emphasize that it sounds like we're all sort of in this together, and figuring out how to be true to it is very difficult. We were talking about this beforehand, and Jess shared a little bit about how hard it is, and it gets so much harder, because it's easy to say nobody works Fridays and everybody takes their vacation and whatever, but in our business we have 5 different legal types of employees, like part-time employees, full-time exempt, full-time non-exempt front lines, and I say that just because it underscores how many different types of jobs there are in any organization, or in many organizations. And so what does balance mean to somebody who's working a part-time job on the front lines of our business versus in Brooklyn is very different. And all I know is, we got to raise awareness and talk about it and keep experimenting.
I mean, there is.
The thing we get in companies is like, this sounds great, Caveday sounds great, and I can't do that, that's not for me. And there's probably people here that are like, this panel sounds great, and they sound awesome, but this is not going to work in my business. And so that's the resistance that I see the most. And I think most of it's bullshit. If you work in client services, it's the hardest, right? If your job is, I need to be responding to people because they're the client, that's the most challenging place to do it. And there are ways to get beyond that. I use IFTTT, which is a free service that checks my email for VIP emails. There are about 3 people that if they email me, I want to know, even if I'm in a deep work session. And so it calls me if those 3 people email me. And so that's what it took for me to be able to shut off for even one sprint. So there are ways around it. Just I guess the takeaway is that there is a war for your attention, and you must fight for it. You must fight for your work and your play.
Yep. And I just, the resistance I get is that, Jess, the world is undeniably digital. Like, you sound like a nostalgic dinosaur. This isn't going to be possible moving forward. And just like you said, there is a war for your attention. The most valuable thing that you all have in this room is your attention and your time. And once you start to look at it that way, you'll start to protect it better. And so when someone says, well, I can't, I have a boss who emails me at 3 o'clock in the morning and at 7 a.m., and I had those bosses. There's a very easy way in which you can start to talk to them or your team, and you say, this isn't sustainable. I'm feeling the words they don't want to hear, burnt out, like I'm making mistakes, less productive, anxious. I want to talk to you. Let's problem solve this together. Let's try. I have some solutions, and I've worked with people on this. Here is, for the next 7 days, this is what I propose. I would like to know that there's no emails coming in between this hour and this hour. I'm going to check, and you work together. When you put it in the boss's terms, which is they're going to lose an employee and have to hire a new person, that costs a lot of money. That you're going to make mistakes, or your productivity is going down by 60%. When you start to speak that way as a team, and you say as a test, what good boss or average boss isn't going to say, all right, let's just give it a shot?
Last question. There is a way for the outside world of impacting what we're talking about. There is a right to disconnect bill implemented in France, on the table, I think, in New York City. Last question would be for you. Do you think this is the way? The government telling us when to email, basically? And why? For all of you.
I think regulation is got to happen, and I'm not going to make friends there. We can't police ourselves. This stuff is way too powerful. We can't study it fast enough. It's growing exponentially faster. It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. We get a study. It's being put in, iPads are being put into first grade and now kindergarten because there's educational apps, but yet we're just discovering that children that have iPads, by the time they enter kindergarten, are 35% empathetic than the ones that didn't, and we just don't know. And unfortunately, it's also the most lucrative business that there is out there, is to create this technology. And so I think that regulation is key. I think that we should, the same way you look at cigarettes or porn or drugs, this needs to be something that we need to be told what to do, the same way you have the food pyramid, the same way that you have, I always say I'm like Ralph Nader, the Crusader. I'm not saying tech is bad. I'm saying tech without seatbelt stop signs, age restrictions, a road test is bad. And Ralph Nader, the Crusader, went ahead and made sure that automobiles became safe, and we're not there yet.
So a strong yes, Jeremy?
I'm big on the rules. I think another takeaway is as rules are powerful, rules keep us safe, and whether people doing it themselves, I think that the more boundaries we develop ourselves and see externally, the more freedom we get to do what we really want to do.
John, I know you're really pro that bill too. So I'm just going to ask you, do you think this is really going to happen in New York?
I don't think it's going to happen in New York, not soon, but maybe in the medium term. I think it shouldn't be that controversial. It's not. The rule isn't you can't send emails after work. The rule is your employer cannot punish you for not being responsive after hours. My mother has worked 25 years in a factory. She makes 2x4s and 2x6s. If her employer said you need to make some 2x4s when you go home at night, her employer should pay her. If your employer says you need to do an hour of emails, that's your job, and you should get paid for that.
Communication, procrastination, and also deep work. To look at it more with a system, things in place, and more as like a job as an industry, while not missing the train. I think this is a great advice. And I thank you all for being open about sharing so many things that you struggle with and do. And I thank you for taking the time today. And I have something to ask you I didn't tell you before. I know from Caveday that you have the best 2-minute breaks I've ever seen. So please, before the next panel, would you do one with us?
I would be honored to.
All right.
All right, so everyone stand up. Put your technology out of sight, because research shows that even if your phone's off, even if it's in sight, it can affect how you engage cognitively. Oh,
So headphones off for 2
headphones
minutes.
off. Great. Does everyone have enough room? Yeah, cool. All right, so close your eyes. Just gonna take a breath together on 3,
And inhale, 2, 3. Hold it for 3, 2, 3. And exhale, 2, 3. You are here, you are learning. Let's do it one more time. Inhale, 2, 3. And exhale, 2, 3. And just where you are right now, keep checking in with us throughout the day. There's a lot of noise, a lot of things, a lot of stimulus today, and you have the ability to go here whenever you need to. And you may need to. So open your eyes. We're gonna wiggle. We're gonna do like as if you had like no bones in your body. And then on 3 we're gonna go and we're gonna like let out the morning. So wiggle, 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 wiggle. On 3, 1, 2, 3. All right.
Thank you. We'll continue 4 minutes. 4 minutes.